Muse for you, awesome websites without code.
Hey, what's up users? John with Muse for you, here to help you build awesome websites without code. And I have a really exciting video tutorial for you today. We're going to be going over the new Swiper.js widget that I just released a few days ago. For those who are not familiar with Swiper.js, it's probably one of the most advanced slideshow scripts on the web. And I was able to integrate that into a widget for Adobe Muse. So you can add a lot of functionality to your slideshows and have really impressive slideshows on your Adobe Muse website. So I'll quickly go over the preview page, and then we'll recreate some of the slideshows in Adobe Muse, and I'll go through all of the different widget options for the Swiper.js widget. So here we have the preview page. So if I go through the slideshow, I click on the arrows, I can go through the different slides. So we can see here we have arrows. The arrows are completely customizable. You can add any arrows in Adobe Muse and then just apply a graphic style to them to assign the previous and next functionality to those arrows. So these are custom arrows I got from flaticon.com, and I just added into Adobe Muse and assigned the graphic style next and previous to them. And I'll go over that in this tutorial as well. And up here we see we have what's called Pagination. So it's kind of like a loader, or it tells you how far along the slideshow you are. So as I slide, we can see there's more purple. I keep sliding. It lets me know the progress of the slideshow. Okay, and I can grab the slides and just drag them. And this widget has a lot of cool functionality, like you can enable free mode. So if I were to drag, it would just kind of slide freely, which I'll go over as well. So this is the first demonstration here. I'll read some of the features that are included, and I'll show a few other slideshows as well. So the features are included. You can add multiple slideshows on one page. You can add up to 12 images per slideshow. You can add parallax text over the slideshow. You can select the number of slides to show at once. You can change the number of slides to show across different breakpoints. So let's say on the largest breakpoint you wanted to show one image per slide, and on another breakpoint you wanted to do 3 images per slide. You could change that within the widget. Or if on the largest breakpoint you wanted to show 3 images at once, you could. And yeah, just change the different images on the different breakpoints. Okay, so you can also add horizontal or vertical slides. You can set the space between the slides. You can set the touch options for touch devices. So this is a really unique feature about the widget. You can completely customize the touch and feel of the slideshow on mobile devices or touch devices, which is really, really great. So yeah, and you can set the slide speed. You can enable free mode, which I went over. I'll kind of demonstrate that, where you just drag the slide and it just slides freely. You can autoplay the slides so they automatically play. The widget works with the built-in Adobe Muse responsive width and height, and stretch to browser width. With responsive width and height and responsive width, you do want to set the page expansion so the arrows are pointing outwards, so the page does expand, and the slide gets larger or smaller, and I'll go over that as well. Okay, so you can set the width and the height of the slideshow within Adobe Muse. You don't have to set the width and the height within the widget. You can just drag the widget container and it'll change the width and the height of the slideshow. You can add custom pagination. You can place custom arrows. You can choose from various slide effects. I'll go over that as well. You can enable keyboard and mouse wheel interaction. You can link slides to internal pages, external pages, and anchor points. You can preload images. The code is really lightweight for your website, and I've made it so it's really lightweight. I have about 7 slideshows on this page alone, and the site loads really great. And there's much more that you can do with this widget. I'll try to cover all the bases, but I just wanted to give a quick overview of all the options for the widget, just to let you know what you can do with it. So those are the features included. Here are more examples. So there's different effects that you can add to the slideshow. This one here is the cube effect. So if I click the arrow, we have this really cool cube effect, and it rotates the slides. So there we go. Then we have with the cover flow effect. I really like this effect a lot. It kind of just slides the slides behind each other, so they're kind of just moving in a really unique way. And here's another example of the cover flow with 3 images per view. So I'm showing 3 images here. And I really like this effect. It just looks really nice. And then we have a flip effect where the slide just literally flips, just like this. Looks good. Okay, and then we have a fade effect, so they just, fade in and out into the different slides. Okay, and you can set vertical slides, so you can set the option right within the widget. You can have the slides be vertical or horizontal, and the arrows will correspond to the vertical slide. So if I click the up arrow, it'll change the slide. If I click the down arrow, the slides will go down. All right, so those are the different slides. Now we have various sizes, so you can make the slide show as large or small as you'd like. Here we just have slideshows that are a certain width and height, and their responsive width. So notice around this breakpoint, the slideshow changes from 3 slides to 1. And that's by changing the slides per view options within the widget. Okay, then we have this one here. This one is the cover flow effect. And again, it's responsive width. And here we have the cube effect. Okay, looks good. And I'll show how to add padding to the top and the bottom of the effect. Some effects require, or they go beyond the widget container, but you can add padding to make sure that the entire effect shows there. Okay, then you can do full screen, so you can have a really interesting full screen slideshow, just like that. I can drag the slides, looks good. Okay, and then you can do parallax text over the slideshow. So we have this text over it. You'd probably want to select images that aren't so, that doesn't have so much going on with it, or just has a darker background and lighter text to make sure the text is visible. And here are all the text options. Basically, you can format the text to, anything you'd like. You can set the tracking, the leading, font size, font weight, font style, text transform, letter spacing, which is tracking, line height, leading, and you can choose from over 800 Google fonts for the text. So yeah, it's really customizable. You can customize the parallax speed of the text and everything like that. So that's the widget in a nutshell. There's a lot of options. You can do quite a lot with the widget. So I'll go ahead and jump into Adobe Muse, and we'll play around with the widget a bit, and I'll showcase how to set the responsive options and pretty much just how to use the widget. So I'll go into Adobe Muse. I'll go into the library panel. If you don't see the library panel, you can go to Window and click on Library. There we go. So this widget can be found at museforyoushop.com. Just want to mention that before I get started, in case you're wondering where to access. You can simply go to museforyoushop.com, and you can click Subscribe Today. And here you can click Subscribe Now to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. The Swiper.js Slideshow is included in the subscription. And here is the widget. You can click Add to Cart to purchase individually, or again, you can click Subscribe to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. All right, so that's the Swiper.js Slideshow, a few of the widget options, the features included, and the preview page that I was just on. So I just wanted to mention that real quick before I got into it, in case you were wondering where to access. So once you get the widget, you simply double click the .mulib file. First you unzip the zip file, then you double click the .mulib file, and it will install directly into the library panel. So once it's installed into the library panel, you can click on Library. If you don't see the library panel, just go to Window and click Library. Okay, so here in the library panel in the search, I'll type in Swiper, type in Swiper.js, and here we have the different widgets. So we have Swiper.js Slideshow, which is just a slideshow that you can customize the width and height. We have the Swiper.js Slideshow full screen. It means it covers the entire browser. And there's a few different options. You can set it above the page, fixed in the browser, or behind the page. Here's the Swiper.js Slideshow, so you can add Parallax, Swiper.js Slideshow with Parallax, so you can add Parallax text to the slideshow. And then we have the Swiper.js Slideshow Parallax full screen, so you can have a full screen slideshow with Parallax text as well. So I'll go ahead and start with the Swiper.js Slideshow. So I'll just click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse, and here we go. So this widget does have quite a few widget options. If you are working with like an older computer, which I've gotten a few emails about that, you're working on Mac OS X 10 point something, really old, and you can't upgrade to, Adobe Muse 2017, I would recommend kind of upgrading your computer if possible. I highly recommend it, because if you do want to get the full functionality of Adobe Muse, you want to use a good computer, and also it integrates really, really well with Photoshop and Illustrator. So having an old computer probably isn't ideal if you want to create really nice websites in Adobe Muse. I just wanted to mention that this widget does have a lot of functionality, so it has a lot of widget options, and it uses a bit more processing power and just to load all the information for the widget. Okay, so enough of that. So let's get into the widget options. So here we have the instance number. So if you have a couple of slideshows or more than one slideshow on the same page, you want to make sure that each slideshow has a unique instance number. So the first slideshow could be instance number 1. The second slideshow could be instance number 2. All right, so then we have the slide section. Before I get into all the widget options, I just want to note here, or kind of demonstrate, there is a documentation here. So if you click documentation, here it kind of outlines all the widget options. I did want to include this with this widget because there are so many widget options. So if you're wondering what certain widget options do, they're all outlined here on the left. So you can just click and read what the different options pertain to and what they do. So wanted to include that there. Once this video is done, it'll be in the video section, so you can watch the video as well. All right, so yeah, I just wanted to mention that, but I will showcase all of this in this tutorial. So here we have the widget, and right now it's just a 400 by 350 pixel widget container. We notice there's no images. It just says Swiper.js Slideshow, which is fine. So the first thing we can do, and I'll actually do this now so we can work with the images as we're changing the widget options. I'll open the widget options. I'll go to the images widget option. I'll click on images. So with the images, you can say scale to fill or scale to fit. It's similar to the scale to fill, scale to fit options in Adobe Muse. Scale to fill means it'll fill the entire image within the slideshow. Scale to fit means it'll take the dimensions of that image and fit it within the slideshow so the entire image is visible. What this means though is that there will be extra white space around the image because the image is not filling the entire slideshow, depending on the dimensions of the image. If that's the case, or if you set it to scale to fit, you can select the scale to fit background color, just so that extra space has a color that matches your website. So I'll demonstrate that as well. So I'm just going to select a few images here. Let me click here. I'll add this one. Let's see, this one. I'll add this one here, and we'll do one more, this one here. Okay, so initially we can't see the images for the slideshow. So what you'll want to do is go to File, Preview Page, and Browser. And here we have the slideshow. So you do have to preview. You can preview in Muse as well. I always recommend to preview in the browser, as you'll get a better representation of how the website will look in the browser. So I like to use Preview Page and Browser. Okay, so let me go back in here, Preview Page and Browser, and there we have the slideshow. So we can see it's the width and height that we set within Adobe Muse. Okay, so let's say we want to make the slideshow full width, or stretch to the browser width. So what we do, we go into Adobe Muse, select the widget, and here in the resize option, we'll say stretch to browser width. And now preview, File, Preview Page, and Browser. And then we have the slideshow. It's set to the browser width. Okay, and we can set the height of the slideshow right in Adobe Muse. Just drag the widget container down, just like that, or you can set the height within the height properties right up here. So let's say I wanted the slideshow to be 500 pixels in height. I would just change it here. So now I'll preview, and we have a larger slideshow there. So if I resize the browser, the slideshow stays stretched to the browser width. So let me demonstrate scale to fit. So I'll open the widget options, and I'll click on images, and in the fitting I'll say scale to fit. Okay, and I'll preview, and as we can see, the image doesn't stretch to the browser width because it's fitting the image within the height that's assigned to the slideshow. So it's literally just using the image dimensions and fitting it within the slideshow so that the entire image is visible. So let's say we didn't want that to be white on the sides. We'd just open the widget options, go into the images section, and then for the background color, we could change it to any color here. I'll select the screen here. Okay, and we'll preview. And as we can see, we have green on the side. If I resize the browser, we can see that image always fits within the slideshow. So that image, the complete size of the image is always visible. All right, looks good. I like scale to fill because it fills the entire slideshow. So I'll say scale to fill here in the scale to fill options. And here within the image options, you can add alternative text for screen readers that don't show images, so the user at least knows what the image is about. And here you can link the image to an internal page, external page, or anchor point. If it's an internal page, it's dot backslash the name of the page. Any spaces require a dash instead of a space. And then .html. So if the name of the page is about us, it would be dot backslash about dash us .html, all lowercase. Anchor point names are always lowercase, not uppercase. There's no uppercase letters, just always lowercase for anchor points. And an external link is HTTP or HTTPS and the URL or the domain that you want to link to. And you can open the link in a new page by selecting this button here. Okay, so one thing I do want to note is, let's say you do want to link to a link or internal, external, or anchor point. So here I'll say museforYouShop.com, and so I'll preview. I've set the link for image 1. We can see the link doesn't go. It doesn't take me to museforYouShop.com, and that's because within the widget, if we go to the slides section, we want to make sure that enable link is checked. This will enable the link for the slideshow. So if I click, it'll take me to that URL. So I'll preview, and if I click, it takes me to museforYouShop.com. So I'm not really going in order here. I'm kind of going in the order in which I think you might, kind of the priorities, like, setting the width and height and responsive width and things like that. So we'll get to all the individual slide options in a moment, but I'm kind of going over the main points that I think are useful when first starting with the widget. Okay, so we've done that. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the link. I'm going to uncheck enable link, and let's set the slideshow to responsive width and height. So I'll go to the resize option right in here, and I'll say responsive width and height. So now if I preview page in browser, we see the slideshow. Now, if you notice, the slideshow doesn't stretch to the browser width, and that's because the website is stopping at the 960 breakpoint. If we look at the breakpoint properties, the initial breakpoint is 960, and if I were to change this to, let's say, 1260 or something larger, I usually use, I think it's 1240. Let me just, it really doesn't matter. I'm just kind of being picky here. But yeah, so there we have the widget container. We can see that the slideshow is a bit wider because it's matching that 1240 breakpoint. So let's say you do want it to stretch to browser width, and I'll go ahead and delete this 1240 breakpoint. Let's say you do want it to go the entire width of the browser. Just make sure that the page expansion option here, that the arrows are pointing outwards. This means the page will expand beyond the 960 breakpoint. So now if I preview again, we can see that the image expands beyond the 960. It's really large because essentially what's happening is that the aspect ratio of the widget is getting larger. So because it's stretching to width and height, it's going like this, like whoop, getting a lot larger, and it'll get a lot smaller because it's changing in width and height. So we can see it goes across the entire browser. If I get smaller, we can see the slideshow gets a lot smaller. So if that's the effect you are going for, you can do that. Just make sure that the page expansion arrows are pointing outwards, so the page expands beyond the current breakpoint and fills the entire browser. Okay, so that's that. The same with responsive width. So if I select the slideshow, go to resize, set responsive width, it's going to stretch the entire browser width because we have, excuse me, my voice cracked, because we have the page expansion pointing outwards. If they're not pointing outwards, let's say they're pointing inwards, it's saying stop the site at the 960 breakpoint. And if I preview, we can see that the slideshow stops at 960. So the width of the slideshow is 960 pixels. Okay, so that's just the page expansion options. It is documented in the documentation. You can just go to setting responsive options and it goes over what I just went over. Okay, so let's go back into the widget options and let's take a look at the slide section. So here you can select the number of slides. You can select from 2 to 12 slides for each slideshow. The slides per view is how many slides are visible at once. So if I were to set this to 3, there would be 3 images showing initially. So there we have 3 images. We can slide through and take a look at the images. I'll go ahead and set the resize option to stretch the browser width, so the entire site stretches to the browser width. Okay, so there we go. So you can have some really nice slides going through. Perfect. And let's go back into the widget options. Slides. You can set the space between slides. It's in pixels, so I could say like 50 pixels and add some spacing between the slides. So that we have 50 pixels of space and there's some space between the slides. Okay, so let's go back in here, slides. And just as a side note, something really quick, you can get pretty creative with this. You can fill the widget container with an image and have a background image between slides. So if I select the widget and I go to fill right up here in Adobe Muse, click on add image, and I'll just select an image here, and it's gonna fill the widget container with that image. And let me fill and say scale to fill and position it in the center. There we have the image. So when I preview, we have that image in the background of the slide. So it's kind of a cool effect. It just popped into my head, and I was working with this before, but I wanted to showcase it. You know, you could have a really cool branding idea, like your logo or your something about your company could be in the background of the slideshow, and the user could slide through and have a really interesting slideshow. It's almost like an interesting parallax effect actually, because the image isn't moving in the background, but the slides are. So it's an interesting effect there. All right, so let's go continue. I'm gonna remove the image and just kind of keep working with the slideshow widget options. Okay, so let's go back into the slides. So there's the space between the slides. You can center the slide, so the slide is always in the center. So let's see how that looks. And I'll preview. So yeah, the slide is, you know, always in the center. We always have a centered slide within the slideshow. There we go. And if you notice, if I resize the browser, the slides per view changes from 3 to 1, and I'll go over that in a second. So let me try to move a bit more quickly through these options. So the initial slide, that's the starting slide you want to start at. 0 is the first slide, 1 is the second, 2 is the third. So the initial slide starts at 0. So you can change the direction of the slideshow from horizontal to vertical. So I'll select vertical. And if I preview, we now have a vertical slide, and we can see that the pagination is on the right here. Looks good. So you can have a vertical slideshow. Okay. So let me move through slides. And here we have the slide offset before and slide offset after. This works really well with one slide per view. You can set an offset before the slideshow, so like 100 pixels, and after the slideshow, you can have 100 pixels at the end of the slideshow. So you can work with that. I myself probably wouldn't use this too much. I like the slideshow to fill the entire width of the browser or whatever widget container I've set the width to, or whatever size the widget container is. Okay, so here we can set the transition speed. So let's say I were to say 5 seconds. 5 seconds, and I'll preview. When I go to the next slide, it takes 5 seconds for that slide to go to the next one. So it's a bit slower. And there we go. Okay, so let's go to the next options. So we've gone over the slides. Loop just means that the last slide will go to the first slide, so it'll continuously loop. If I uncheck loop there, I'm gonna set the space between slides to 0 as well. If I uncheck loop, then the slideshow will stop at the last slide. So let me just go to the last slide. Now it's going really slow because I set the transition speed to 5. Okay. So if I try to go to the next slide, it's gonna stop. It's not gonna let me because it's stopping at the last slide. If I were to set the loop, it would go to the first slide. Okay, so let's go ahead into slides. I'll set it to loop and grab cursor It just means that when you click on the slide, you can drag it like this, and that cursor turns into a grab symbol. So it's like grabbing the slide and pulling it. So it's a fun little effect, so the user can have fun and just kind of drag the slideshow that way. Okay, so that's the grab cursor. I kind of closed that a little bit too quick, but yeah, you can just, drag the slideshow like this. All right, so I think we've gone over all the slide options. I've gone over the enable link. I'm gonna set the slide speed back to 1,000, and let's go through the other widget options. So here we have images. I've gone through the images, responsive breakpoints. So the responsive breakpoints are really interesting. Here you can set the slides per view at particular breakpoints. You can choose 4 different breakpoints. So here you would set the breakpoint width, the slides per view, and the space between slides. So let's say at the 960 breakpoint, I want to change the slides per view to 3. So I've changed it to 3, and the distance between slides, I'll say 100. So let's see how that looks. So I'll preview in the browser, and there we have one image or one slide per view because the width of the browser is greater than 960. And when I resize to the 960 breakpoint, right there we have 3 slides, and there's 100 pixels width between each slide. I think I set it to 100 pixels, yeah. So yeah, let's go ahead and bring the window resizer in there. So here we're getting to the 960. Right after the 960, it's 1 slide per view. And then when it hits the 960 breakpoint, it changes to 3 slides per view with more space between the slides. So I'm going to close these windows here just to close these tabs. All right, so that's the responsive breakpoints. You can change those different options, the breakpoint width, what breakpoint you want the settings to change. You can change the slides per view and the slides per view and the space between slides. So you have breakpoint 1, breakpoint 2, breakpoint 3, and breakpoint 4. All right, looks good. So here we have the autoplay options. So if I click enable autoplay, the autoplay will start. Here's the autoplay delay, how long you want to wait before it transitions to the next slide or goes to the next slide. So every 2 seconds, the slides will change, and it'll take 1 second for the transition speed, because that's what we have the transition speed set here, 1 second between slides. So there we go. So stop on last here, this option means the autoplay will stop on the last slide, and disable on interaction means that if a user hovers over the slideshow, the autoplay will stop. All right, so there we have the options. Let me scroll down here. So 2 seconds delay between each slide. So let's go ahead and preview that. So I'll file preview page in browser. And so 2 seconds, next slide, 2 seconds, next slide, and so on. So you can have a nice autoplay slideshow as well. And it's continuously looping, so it'll go to the next slide. All right, so now the really fun part is adding custom arrows to the slideshow. So if we click on navigation buttons, we can enable custom buttons. So by default, it's already enabled. If you did want the default navigation buttons that comes with the slideshow, just enable default navigation buttons and uncheck enable custom buttons. So now I'll preview, and we have these blue arrows for the default navigation buttons. I don't recommend this as much because you can't customize the color. They're just the default arrows that comes with the Swiper.js script. So you can add your own custom buttons. So we'll go back into the widget, and we'll click on the navigation buttons, and here we'll click enable custom buttons, and we'll uncheck enable default navigation buttons. So here we can see it says previous button graphic style name, and it's prev, P-R-E-V for previous. You can set the button cursor. By default, it's set to the pointer, so that hand when hovering over the previous button, or you can select a custom image for the previous button cursor. The image does have to be 128 pixels by 128 pixels or less. And then we have the next button graphic style name, which is next, and the next button cursor type is a pointer, and the same thing, you can add your own custom cursor for the cursor type. Just make sure it's 128 pixels by 128 pixels or less. All right, so let's go ahead and add some custom buttons to the website in Adobe Muse. So I'll go to my Finder, and here we have the arrows folder, and I have a few arrows in here. So I'm going to select this arrow here. It's an SVG. I downloaded from flaticon.com, and I changed the color in Adobe Illustrator. So I'll go ahead and click, hold, and drag this SVG image into Adobe Muse. And initially it's too large. That's a really large button. So I'm gonna go ahead into the width and height. I'm gonna constrain the width and height so they change together. And I'm gonna set it to 50 by 50. All right, and for the responsive option, the resize option, I'm gonna say none, because I don't want that arrow to get smaller or larger as the width of the browser changes. Okay, so I'm gonna place this arrow to the right because it's the next arrow, so it's pointing to the right. I'll place it right over here, and I'll pin it responsively to the right, so it'll stay relative to the right side of the browser. So I'll use the responsive pinning options here. Then I'll copy and paste this arrow, and I'll grab a corner, I'll hold Shift, and I'll rotate it 180 degrees so the arrow points to the left. And I'll align it with that arrow on the right, and I'll pin it responsively to the left so it stays relative to the left side of the browser as the browser resizes. Okay, so now I'll assign the graphic style names to these buttons. So for the next button, the graphic style name is next. Next. So I'll click on the graphic styles panel. And if you don't see the graphic styles panel, you can go to Window and click on Graphic Styles. So with the widget selected, I'll click on this icon here in the graphic styles panel. It looks like a piece of paper with a folded corner. And I'll double click on Style, and I'll call this Next, because that's the graphic style name that's in the widget. And for the previous button, I'll click here, create a new graphic style, and I'll double click here, and I'll call this PREV, which is short for previous, because again, that's the graphic style name that is in the widget. So just like that, we have previous and next button. So if I preview the slideshow and I click on the arrows, it takes me to the next or previous slideshow. So I'm noticing here, it's not relative to the right. Oh, again, because we don't have page expansion set. So this is literally stopping at the 960 breakpoint. So I want to go back into Adobe Muse and set the page expansion so the arrows point outwards. Okay, so now I'll preview again, and the arrows will go all the way to the right and the left. And if I resize, those arrows will stay to the right and the left. Perfect. All right, so it's as simple as that, just assigning the graphic style name that is in the widget to the buttons that you want to act as next and previous buttons. Did I say that right? I think I did. Okay, so that's that. If you did have multiple slideshows, just change the graphic style names for the next that's voice crack number 2, to just change the next and previous buttons to like next one or previous one. Otherwise, if they have the same graphic style name, the buttons will control both slideshows at the same time. So you want unique graphic style names for unique slideshows on the same page. And hopefully that made sense. If you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, you just want unique graphic style names for different slideshows, or arrows for different slideshows. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to pagination. This is another fun effect. So for pagination, you can say none, meaning there's no pagination. Pagination is just like a secondary navigation. You can have dots, which are those bars at the bottom. So for the dots, we'll start with dots. Yeah, you can have dots, fraction, or progress bar. So if I select dots, we have the dots widget options here. So let's say I wanted a circle for the dots. Right now they're squares. If we go ahead and preview, we have the squares for the pagination. Let's say I wanted them to be perfect circles. I'll just go into pagination. And for the dots width and height, I'll set it to a perfect square. So I'll set the width and height to the same. So I'll say 15 pixels by 15 pixels. For the dots radius, I'm going to say 100. So it becomes a perfect circle. And you can set the dot's initial color, the initial opacity, which is kind of the visibility. 0 means the dots are not visible, which you probably wouldn't want because the user wouldn't be able to click on it. But you can set it to be a bit more see-through in the opacity option. You can set it to like 0.5 or 0.6, and it'll be a bit more see-through. The dot's active color, what color is the dot when that current slide is visible, and the active opacity of the dot. So we've changed it to a circle. So we've set it to a perfect square, and we changed the border radius to 100 pixels, so it becomes a perfect circle. So now we have circles here for the navigation. We can see the active color is different than the regular color there. So when it becomes active, yeah, the dots change color. Okay, so that's the dots pagination. So let's move on to the fraction option. So I'll select fraction here in the pagination type. Yeah, fraction. And then we have the fraction option. So you can set the font size. So I'm going to set it a bit larger to 32 pixels. The font color we'll just say this orange for now, and the position from bottom. So let's see how it looks now. The position from the bottom of the slideshow is 10 pixels. So let's go ahead and preview. And there we have the pagination. It's, there's the color, 3 out of 4, 4 out of 4. I can make it so that it's a little bit higher from the bottom of the slideshow. So I'll just here from position from bottom, I'll say 40 pixels. I'll change the color to something darker so we can see it. And I'll preview in the browser. Okay, there's black, and it's a little bit higher from the bottom of the slideshow. So if you did want that, you could use that. You can change the font text for the fraction. Simply select the widget, then in the text option in the upper control bar, or in the text panel, you can change the font for the text. Just make sure that it's a web font and not a system font. So I'm choosing kind of a really out there font just to showcase it. The font inside the widget will change as well. And that'll show you what font you're using for the fraction. So there we have those interesting numbers for the fraction. Okay, I'll go ahead and change it to something a little bit more readable. I'll say Roboto medium. Okay, and I'll preview. And there we go. Perfect. So you can change the font type for the numbers in the fraction. All right, so the last pagination option is the progress bar. I think bushcrack number 3, progress bar. And here you can set the progress bar color and the height. So if I were to set the progress bar height to 20, we'd have a really thick progress bar at the top. I like the progress bar. It's a really nice way to show the progress of the slideshow. So as it changes, we see the progress bar changes as well, letting us know the length of the slideshow and what slide we're at. So I really like that there. It's a really nice way to show the progress of the slideshow. Okay, so we've gone over all the pagination options. You can say none here within the pagination, and there will be no pagination for the slideshow. Okay, so it's just the navigation arrows there. And you can drag and change the slides that way. All right, so those are the pagination options. Now let's go to the effects. This part is a lot of fun. So for the effect, you can select slide, fade, cube, cover flow, or flip. I'll select cube. I'll show a few of the effects. They're kind of demonstrated within the preview pages. So I selected cube here. So I'll go ahead and preview. And we have that cube effect. So the cube effect works really well with one slide per view. I don't recommend having more than one slide per view if you're using the cube effect. The cover flow and the flip effect work well with multiple slides per view. Just the cube effect doesn't work great because you'd have multiple cubes rotating. Okay, so I'll showcase something else real quick. So if you notice, the cube effect is clipping at the bottom. You can add padding at the top and the bottom of these effects, so the full effect will show. So I'll open the widget options, and in the effects section, you can add padding at the top and the bottom. So I'm going to add padding of 100 pixels just to make sure there's enough space for that corner of the cube to show. So I'll go ahead and preview. And if I flip, so we can see the corner of the cube is showing because now there's more padding at the bottom of the slideshow. It doesn't affect the site, it just adds padding to the slideshow so we can see more of the effect. Okay, and you can do the same for the top. So if the slideshow was more kind of in the middle of the site, you could add padding to the top and the full cube effect would show. All right, so I'll show a few other effects. So with the cube effect, you can enable slide shadows, the shadow for the effect. It just adds kind of an interesting shadow. So I'll enable both of these, and you can set the shadow offset and the shadow scale. So you can play with those options and kind of get a unique shadow for the slideshow. So there we go. You can't really notice it that much when you're flipping. A bit of shadow gets added to the slideshow. It gives it kind of a bit more depth there. Okay, and you can just play with that and see what works best. It's not really that noticeable, so maybe you don't need to enable it. All right, so let's go to the cover flow option, and this one I really like. It's a really cool effect. So I'll go to File, Preview Page in Browser, and if I change the slides, we have this unique cover flow effect. So we can see for 3, it works really well. If I go back to 1 here, it looks good. So I really like this effect a lot. It's probably my favorite. Probably shouldn't say I have favorites, but just really love that effect there. So you can change the rotate amount of the cover flow, the stretch, the depth. If I change the depth to something like crazy, like 1,000, the cover flow will, like, the images will go back for fourth voice crack. The images will go back really far. So we can see, I love that effect. It goes like way back and then the next slide changes. So you can have fun with those options. The modifier literally takes all the options and multiplies it by that modifier. So here we have the modifier. So if you were to set this to 2, it would multiply all those options by that modifier. So let's go ahead and try that. I'll say 3, might be interesting. So I'm multiplying all those options by 3, and there we go. It's a crazy effect. I just love looking at that. Just amazing. I mean, that in itself, I would use that for a site. It's like a user's going through, you can see like all the different slides at once as it's flipping. It's just a really great effect. I really like that. Let me just play with it a bit more here. So yeah, very cool. So that just gave me an idea. I might use that for something. I don't know, but I like that. It's just a really fun effect. All right, and then we have, I'll show the last one here, the flip effect. So I'll select effect, select flip. So here we can set the slide shadows and the limit rotation. So just a few options there. Fifth voice crack. Preview page and browser, and we just have this really nice flip effect there. Okay, so those are the effects. You can also slide and fade the slideshow. So if I select fade, I can crossfade it. I like the crossfade. It just kind of fades in and out, fades the slideshows in and out, which looks really good. So I'll preview, and we just have a really nice crossfade for the slides. Looks nice. All right, so let's move on to the next widget options. So those are the effects. So let's go into free mode. So here I'm going to enable free mode, and I'm gonna enable, actually let's just take a look at how it looks with free mode. So let's go ahead and preview. And let me set the slide effect to slide, because we can really see it when it's set to slide. And let me preview. And when I slide, we can see it's just in free mode. Free mode means it's not snapping, number 6, voice crack number 6. It means it's not snapping to the slides basically. If we add free mode momentum, this is really fun. So if I enable free mode momentum and I preview and I slide, we can see it just freely slides, which is a lot of fun. On touch devices, this could be really cool because the user could just swipe and the slides could run through. So let's go to a few more options here in free mode. So let's enable free mode momentum bounce and free mode sticky. So it'll bounce a little bit once it sticks to that particular slide. Changing these options will just add more momentum or less momentum, or more velocity, momentum velocity, or less momentum velocity. Or here, free mode momentum bounce, you can add more by changing it to a higher value, and free mode minimum velocity as well there. Okay, so let's go ahead and preview. And if I go like this, it'll stick. And you notice there's a bit, let me see, there's a bit of a bounce. If it doesn't land perfectly on a slide, it'll bounce a little bit to adjust to that slide, and it will stick because we have enable free mode sticky enabled, so it'll snap to that slide. So there we go. So let me uncheck enable free mode sticky. So I'll go to free mode, uncheck free mode sticky, and preview. If I slide, there we go. It kind of bounces a little bit. That's the free mode bounce in there. But you can experiment and just see how it looks if you want it to bounce a little bit as the user is going through free mode. Okay, so those are the free mode options. It just lets the slides run through freely there. So the next section is touches. So if we go to touches, there's a lot of widget options here. I'm not going to cover all of these. In the documentation, it kind of outlines what each of these options does. A lot of it's kind of self-explanatory, like simulate touch. So on desktop, by grabbing the slide, it'll act as a touch movement, as if a user was using their thumb or finger to slide through the slideshow. You can enable long swipes, short swipes, touch angle, touch ratio. All of this is documented. It is a lot to go through and kind of explain everything, but you can take a look at the documentation, see what each one does, and experiment and get the perfect feel for the slideshow on touch devices and mobile devices. So this is a big part of the widget. It lets you customize how it feels on touch devices, which is super important because I think search engine or searches or browsing on the internet is more on mobile than it is on desktop now. So that number, mobile surpassed desktop at some point. I myself still use desktop a lot for searches. I do find it not as easy sometimes to search on phone, but I'm actually using the phone more for searches. So a lot of people are using their device to navigate through websites. So having a cool slideshow that they can touch and go through in a unique way is really cool. And you can set that all up in the touches option in here. Okay, so let's go to the touch resistance. So touch resistance is just, a bit of resistance for when the user touches the slideshow. So if you don't want the slideshow to be so touchable, you can set a bit of resistance so it's not so freely, slidable or the user has to touch it a bit more for it to slide, basically. Okay, and all of this you can experiment with. I just wanted to include all these options because it is what makes the Swiper.js script so great. There is all these options and it's all available within this widget. Okay, so let's move on to clicks. So here you can slide to click slide. So if you had, let's say, 3 slides per view, so I go to slides and I set this to 3 and I'll preview. So I'll preview in the browser. And if I click on this slide, it'll go to that slide. So it'll slide to the clicked slide. Okay, so that's pretty self-explanatory there. Swiping or no swiping on touch devices, you can allow to swipe to the previous slide or allow to swipe to the next. So if the user swipes, it'll go to the previous. If the user swipes to the right, it'll go to the next. Okay, so that's the swiping, no swiping. Keyboard, mouse wheel, you can enable keyboard or mouse wheel interaction. So I'll go ahead and enable keyboard control, mouse wheel force to access. You can take a look in the documentation and these options as well. You can invert the mouse wheel and set the mouse wheel sensitivity. So I've enabled keyboard control and mouse wheel control. So I'll go ahead and preview. I can use my arrow keys. The next goes to the next slide. The back arrow goes to the previous slide. And I can use my mouse wheel here as well. Let me close some of these tabs here. So yeah, there we go. Mouse wheel changes the slides as well. Perfect. All right, looks good. So let's go to the next section, which is image options. So here you can preload the images. So once the website loads, it starts loading all the images and you can update on images ready. So the whole slider updates, all the options updates once all the images are ready. So you can just experiment with that. If you are keen on how your website is loading, just take a look at the console in Chrome. I like using the Chrome inspector. I can right click, inspect, go to network and just hit Command R and it'll show me how my website's loading and how long it takes to load. This site took 371 milliseconds to load. So you can check, the images and things like that. So it's the network tab in Chrome and just hit Command R and it'll record how your website is loading, all the scripts, all the images and everything like that. Lets you know how large your images are, which is really important to know. It's a really good thing to know when developing your website. Okay, so this video is getting fairly long. So yeah, I've gone over all the widget options there, and again, it's in the documentation. I do recommend reading the documentation for touches, like iOS edge swipe detection, enable to release touch events on iOS devices where swiping back goes to a previous page, and iOS edge swipe threshold area from the left side of the screen to release swipe to go back on iOS. So these are just cool things to know when developing the slideshow and adding to your website. You can customize all of these options for iOS devices and things like that. Okay, so those are all the widget options. That's why I called it an advanced slideshow widget as well, because there's so many widget options and so many things you can customize within the slideshow. So I'm going to quickly go over the full screen slideshow and then the parallax as well, because this video is getting a bit long. So before I do that, let me just copy and paste this slideshow just to quickly showcase what to do when you have multiple slideshows on the same page. So I'll select the slideshow. If they both have the same instance number, you will run into the slides not showing. So the second slide doesn't show anything. So what you want to do here is go into the slideshow and change the instance number to 2, or any instance number besides 1, because that's the instance number for the first slide. And I'll preview page in browser. And there we go, we have 2 slides there. Okay, so I've also disabled keyboard and mouse wheel because I just want to navigate with the arrows. So let's go ahead and see how that looks. So I'll preview, and if I click the arrows, we can see both slides change. And that's because both of these arrows have the same graphic style name. So for the second widget, I just want to go into the widget options and the navigation buttons. I want to say previous one and next one, or you can change the graphic style names completely. And then I'll select these buttons, the right arrow, I'll go to the graphic styles panel, create a new graphic style, and double click here and call this next one. Click OK, click on the previous button here, create a new graphic style, and so let me double click on this one and call this previous one. Okay, and I'll preview. And now these buttons just control this slide, and these buttons just control this slide. So each slideshow needs its own unique arrows or graphic style names for the arrows, so it controls that particular slideshow. Okay, so let's quickly move on to the full screen slideshow. So I'll go to the library panel, I'll type in Swiper.js, and I'll bring in the Swiper.js slideshow full screen. Here I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse. And all the options are the same, except that it's now full screen. So I'll just go into images, I'll add a few files here, and this one, and this one. Okay, and the only difference here is for the position. You can set it above the web page, so it's like a cover over the web page. You can say fixed in browser, so it always stays fixed within the browser or behind the web page. So let's say above web page, and let me zoom out here. And if I were to create any content on the page, the slideshow would appear above the content. So I'll preview, so you can picture the slide. I can't scroll up here, but the slide is literally above the web page. So I'll preview. There we have the slideshow. If I scroll down, the content appears below the slideshow. If I were to say fixed in browser, so if I say fixed in browser, right in here, for the position, let's see, we go to file, preview page in browser, and the slideshow is fixed, and you can scroll up and down the site. And if I said behind the web page, so just like this, it'll fill the entire browser, and once the user scrolls, the slideshow won't be there. Let me add a bit more scroll space. So there we go. So it appears behind this element. So it's starting with the web page, but it's starting, it's filling the entire browser initially. And when you scroll, the rest of the web page will show as well. So if you wanted that, like just have it as at the top, but still have elements on top of it, you can select that option and the user scrolls and there's more content below. So you can experiment with that and just see what works best for your website. So that's it for the full screen. You could use the browser setting widget to add text over it and things like that. So I'll quickly go on to the parallax option. So Swiper.js Slideshow Parallax. So here I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse. So this is the slideshow with text. So I'm going to make the slideshow stretch to browser width and open the widget options. So this has a few more widget options as well. So here we can see we have title text. So you can basically customize all the text for the text in the slideshow. So we have title text, subtitle text, and paragraph text. So all of these have the same option, so they're all customizable, and you can change the font type. And then we have text at breakpoint. So at a specific breakpoint, you can remove the text, or you can disable any of the text, the title text, subtitle text, and paragraph text. So for this one, I've disabled the subtitle text and the paragraph text, and the only one that's showing at the 480 breakpoint is the title text. So I'm moving kind of quickly through this. If you have any questions, let me know. But this video is getting a bit long, so yeah, let me preview in the browser. So there we have the title, subtitle, and paragraph. And if I resize the browser, we just have the title, and the size is a bit smaller. So you can customize the at a particular breakpoint, you can customize the position, the font size, and the alignment. So let me go ahead and add some images. So I'll go ahead and add images. You'll also notice I'm gonna add dark images here actually, so we can see that text a bit better. So I'm just gonna select all dark images here, and let me scroll down, and this one, and this one. Actually, that one has some color there, so I'll select this one. Okay, so let me change the text to white. I'll just change it to all white here. Subtitle text, change it to white. And paragraph text, we'll change it to white. Okay, and I'll preview. So I'll preview in the browser. And there we have the title and the subtitle. Looks good. So I like this kind of galaxy effect over it. Looks really cool. So you can also disable or enable the parallax movement. So we have this parallax movement option. You can enable the parallax movement. If you have more than one slide per view, I would recommend disabling the parallax movement. That way the text will still show. When there's more than one slide per view, or when you have different effects like cube or flip, it kind of messes with the effect. So if you have kind of interesting effects, you do want to disable the parallax movement. So you can experiment with this. This just changes the movement of the text as it comes in into the slideshow. So you can add some interesting parallax movement there. So the last thing I'm going to showcase here is changing the position of the text. So let's say I wanted the text on the left side. I would go into the text option, and for the alignment, I would say left, and you can position it, a certain position from the left. So the title is positioned to the left now in the text alignment, and I'll go ahead and preview in the browser, and we can see the title text is on the left. It's all the way to the left, so I want to go into the widget options and give it a bit more space from the left. So I'll say 20% from the left, and I'll do this for the subtitle text as well. From the left, I'll say 20% align to the left, and for the paragraph text as well, I'll say 20% from the left and align text to the left. Okay, and let's go ahead and preview. And there we have the text on the left side. Looks good. All right, so yeah, the last thing I'll show is changing the Google font for the text. There is a document within the widget folder, kind of outlining how to change the font using Google Fonts. So I'll go back into the widget, and here we have the Google Fonts option. So just click here within the widget, and it'll take us to Google Fonts. So let's say I wanted to change the font to something here. We'll change it to Laura. Here you just want to click on this plus button, and then down here you can see it says one family selected. Just click there, and here it'll tell you the font family. So just copy this right before the semicolon. So I'll hit Command C to copy. I'll go back into Muse, and I'll go into the title text, and for the Google font family, I'll just hit Command V to paste that in there. And then for the font name, it's just this first name here. So basically the name of the font, and just paste it in there. So the font name is Laura, and the font family is Laura, serif. And I'll enter, and now we'll preview. And we can see that text is now the Laura text. And I would add the font smoother here just to make sure I have really smooth fonts. Okay, just in there. Okay, looks good. All right, so let me open the widget options. The last thing I'll show is adding the text. So within the images section, we now have more widget options. So for the title, you can change the title for that particular slide. The subtitle, awesome websites plus no code. And for paragraph, this is an example of paragraph text. So you could write whatever you'd like. All the images have these options right in there. So you can add the title, subtitle, paragraph text, and you can link the slides to internal, external, or anchor points and add alternative text, just like in the previous slides. That was voice crack number 7, I believe. Okay, so let me go ahead and preview. You can also open the link in a new page. All right, so I'll preview, and then we have it. We have the text, Muse for you, awesome websites plus no code. This is an example of paragraph text. So we can see there's parallax movement to the text as I slide through, and the rest don't have any, or just have that default title, subtitle, and paragraph. So I could work with the parallax movement, kind of add more parallax movement or less in the parallax section. So I could say negative 300 and 500. So you can play with these options and just see how they work for you. You can add positive or negative values to kind of go left and right within the parallax movement. So there we go. We have some really unique parallax movement. All right, looks good. So that's all I wanted to cover. We noticed that on the 480 breakpoint, it just changes to the title text, because within the text breakpoint widget option, the text changes at the 480 breakpoint, and we've disabled the subtitle text and the paragraph text, and we only have the title text showing. And you can change the position on that breakpoint and the font size and the alignment. Okay, so I think I've covered everything. I know it's a lot of widget options, a lot of information, but I did want to include as many widget options so you can really customize the slideshow for your website. If you did have any questions, you could go to the documentation, and it kind of outlines all of the widget options and what you can do with the different widget options. All right, looks good. So that is it for this video tutorial. The full screen with the parallax is the same thing. It's just the full screen with the parallax text over it, so you can add text to full screen slides. And that's showcased, it's not showcased in the preview pages. So I'll go ahead and add that really quick, and it'll be the last thing I showcase here. So Swiper.js, parallax full screen. So I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse, and there we go. So I'll just add the images, and we'll just see the text. So images, image 1. Yeah, we'll do lighter images here. This one, and this one, and this one. I'll scroll down here, and this one, and I'll preview, and there we have it. So we have the text over the full screen slideshow. All right, and again, you want to select images that kind of showcase the text and doesn't kind of cover the text or make it hard to read. So yeah, that's basically it. All the options again are the same as well. We just have that extra text option. You can add the text within the images section as well, and format the text to your liking. Pretty much all the formatting options are there, and I kind of outline the features of the formatting options on the preview pages as well. Okay, so I think I've talked enough. Probably one of my longer videos, just because there's so many widget options, and the slideshow is a bit more in depth. You have a lot of options, and you can do a lot, with the slideshow. So that's it for this video tutorial. Again, to access this widget, you can simply go to museforyoushop.com, and here you can click on subscribe today, and here you can click subscribe now to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. The Swiper.js Slideshow is included in the subscription. Here you can click on the Swiper.js Slideshow for Adobe Muse. Here you can click add to cart to purchase individually, or again, you can click subscribe to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. Here we have a few of the widget options, the features included. Here's the community section, 8th voice crack. The community section, if you had any questions about the widget, and the video will be here as well. I'll post it here, and within the documentation, 9th voice crack, 10 voice cracks. Okay, and here's the preview page. Okay, so you can check it out here and see all you can do with the Swiper.js slideshow for Adobe Muse. So that's it for this video tutorial. Again, I do this to help you build awesome websites without code. I do have another widget that's coming out very soon that I think is very cool, and I'm going to be very happy to share that as well. Yeah, so that's it for this video tutorial. Again, I do this to help you build awesome websites without code. If you like this video tutorial, you can subscribe below. Also in the show more section below are links to other resources and links to museforyoushop.com. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video tutorial. Thank you.
Muse for you, awesome websites without code.